Have you ever looked outside during a heavy snowfall and felt like the whole world had gone completely silent? No traffic, no people. Just endless white stretching in every direction. It is peaceful. Until you realize you are not actually alone. Snow has a strange way of hiding things. It swallows footprints, muffles screams, and erases every trace of what came before. One minute you are enjoying the beauty of a winter night, and the next you are questioning everything your eyes just saw. The stories you are about to hear aren't about ghosts. At least, not in the way you'd expect. They're about ordinary people who stepped outside during snowstorms and encountered something they still can't explain. Strange voices, impossible people, and terrifying moments that left behind one chilling mystery, because when the snow finally stopped falling, there was only one question left. If nobody else was there, then who was watching them? Snow has always had this weird effect on me. The moment those first flakes start drifting down, I feel this urge to get outside. I can't really explain it. Some people crave late-night drives or long road trips when they're stressed. Me, I go for walks in the snow. I live in a quiet, wooded area. My neighborhood isn't buried deep in the forest, but it is close enough that a 5-minute drive puts me on hiking trails surrounded by nothing but trees. It is usually peaceful out there, especially at night. That evening wasn't supposed to be anything special. I remember checking the weather several times, like I always do during winter, and there wasn't supposed to be any snow. So when I looked out my bedroom window and saw thick flakes pouring from the sky, it caught me completely off guard. It was almost like someone had flipped a switch. 1 minute, nothing. The next, everything was turning white. Within minutes, the ground had already started disappearing beneath fresh snow. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, threw on my boots, and drove to my favorite hiking trail. The parking lot was completely empty when I arrived. That wasn't unusual. Hardly anyone visited the trail at night, especially during winter storms. As soon as I stepped outside, everything felt incredibly peaceful. Snow muffled every sound. The only thing I could hear was the soft crunch of my boots with every step. For nearly 20 minutes, I wandered through the woods, taking in the silence. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the beams of my flashlight while the trees stood perfectly still around me. It was beautiful. Almost too beautiful. Eventually, I stopped walking just to enjoy the moment. That is when I heard it. Hi. A child's voice. I froze instantly. The sound was so unexpected that my brain refused to process it at first. I slowly turned in every direction, sweeping my flashlight across the trees. Nothing. No movement. No footprints. No one. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe the wind had carried a sound from somewhere nearby. I took one step toward the trail leading back to my car. Hi, the voice came again, louder, clearer, definitely a little boy. Every instinct told me something wasn't right. My pulse started pounding in my ears as I searched the darkness again. Still nobody. Then the voice laughed. Up here, silly. My head snapped upward. There, sitting casually on a thick tree branch, was a little boy. He couldn't have been older than 9. He sat there swinging his legs like he didn't have a care in the world, smiling so widely it almost looked painful. For one brief second, I actually felt relieved. At least it was a kid. Maybe he'd climbed the tree while playing and gotten stuck. I walked closer. Then something caught my attention. The ground beneath the tree was untouched. Fresh snow covered everything in a smooth, perfect blanket. There wasn't a single footprint anywhere. Not one. I looked from the ground back up to the boy. The lowest branch was at least 20 feet above the ground. There was no ladder, no climbing gear. Nothing. That realization hit me like ice water. If there were no footprints, then he'd climbed that tree before the snow had even started, which meant he'd been sitting there alone, completely motionless, for nearly an hour. A knot formed in my stomach. Trying to stay calm, I called up to him. How'd you get up there? He just smiled even wider. It is a secret. His answer sent another chill through me. Then he slowly stood up on the branch. He stretched both arms out to his sides like he was balancing. Watch this. Before I could say a word, he leaned backward and fell. Time seemed to stop. He dropped nearly 30 feet straight onto the frozen ground. The sound his body made when it hit was sickening. A heavy bone-crushing thud. I was certain I just watched a child die. Without thinking, I sprinted toward him. But before I could reach him, the boy suddenly sprang to his feet. Like nothing had happened. No broken bones. No pain. No blood. He simply stood there, smiling. Then he turned and bolted into the woods, laughing. Not a child's innocent laugh. A wild, unhinged, almost animal-like cackle. Adrenaline took over. I chased after him, yelling for him to stop. The deeper we ran into the woods, the louder his laughter echoed between the trees. Then everything changed. As I passed one large pine tree, something slammed into my back. The impact nearly knocked the air out of me. Tiny hands grabbed my shoulders. Sharp fingernails dug into the back of my neck. I screamed as the boy clawed at me with unbelievable strength. He wasn't trying to scare me anymore. He was trying to tear me apart. I reached behind me, grabbed him with everything I had, and threw him over my shoulder. He crashed into the snow. I expected him to stay down. Instead, he stood up instantly, looked directly at me, and laughed. Then he disappeared into the darkness between the trees, just like that. Gone. I didn't chase him again. I ran. I don't even remember making it back to my car. The next thing I clearly remember was sitting in a hospital while nurses cleaned the deep scratches across my neck and shoulders. Police searched the hiking trail for hours. They found the tree. They found the area where I said everything happened, but they didn't find the boy. No blood, no clothing, no signs of another person. The only footprints anywhere in the fresh snow were mine. This happened during winter break when I was 19 years old, home from college and enjoying the rare luxury of having the house completely to myself. For the first few days, it was great. No classes, no homework, no roommates, just peace and quiet. But by the second week, that peace had turned into boredom. Then the snowstorm arrived. By late afternoon, it was dumping snow so hard you could barely see across the street. The wind howled against the windows, and local news stations were already warning people to stay off the roads. Within a few hours, nearly every street in town had become almost impossible to drive on. I spent most of the day pacing around the house, scrolling through my phone, watching television, and eating whatever I could find in the kitchen. Eventually, I got an idea. A stupid one. My best friend Ryan only lived about a mile and a half away. Instead of texting him, I decided it would be hilarious to just show up at his front door completely unannounced. At the time, it sounded like an adventure. Looking back, it was one of the worst decisions I've ever made. I bundled up in layers, pulled my hood tight, and stepped outside. The cold hit me immediately. Snowflakes swirled around under the orange glow of the streetlights, making everything look strangely beautiful. The entire neighborhood was silent. No passing cars, no people shoveling driveways. It almost felt like I had the whole town to myself. For the first half mile, I actually enjoyed the walk. Fresh snow crunched beneath every step while huge flakes drifted lazily through the air. It was peaceful. Then I saw headlights. Far ahead, barely visible through the snow, two bright lights slowly moved toward me. A snowplow. That made perfect sense. Someone had to clear the roads eventually. The plow crawled forward at a painfully slow pace, pushing through the storm. Then, without warning, it jerked violently to the right. The entire truck veered off the road. I watched it plow straight through the snowbank and disappear into the trees. A loud crunch echoed through the night, metal against wood. My stomach dropped. Oh no, the driver must have lost control. Without thinking, I started running toward the crash. The deep snow made every step exhausting, and by the time I finally reached the tree line, I was breathing hard. The headlights were still shining between the trees. The engine was still running. Steam drifted from beneath the hood. Everything about the scene looked exactly like you'd expect after an accident. The truck's front end was wrapped around a massive tree. I rushed to the driver's side. The door was closed. I looked through the window. The seat was empty. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I checked again. Nobody. Maybe the driver had climbed out. I hurried around to the passenger side. Also empty. No one. Not a single person. The windshield wasn't broken. The doors weren't open. There wasn't any blood. No footprints leading away from the vehicle. Nothing. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up. A feeling I still can't describe washed over me. Pure instinct. Every part of my body screamed the exact same message: leave, right now. I slowly backed away from the truck, then I turned around and started walking as fast as I could. That is when I heard it. Help! A man's voice. Loud. Desperate. It came from somewhere behind me. I stopped for half a second. Every decent person wants to help someone in trouble. But something about that voice felt wrong. I can't explain why. It didn't sound injured. It didn't sound frightened. It sounded off. Like someone pretending to sound desperate. I kept walking. Then the voice came again. Help! This time it was much closer. Impossible close. I'd only taken a few steps. No one could have moved that fast through knee-deep snow, not even an Olympic athlete. The realization hit me instantly. Whatever was calling wasn't where I'd first heard it. I broke into a full sprint. Snow flew behind me as I ran harder than I ever had in my life. The voice never called out again, but I never once looked back. After what felt like forever, I finally reached Ryan's house. I pounded on the door so hard I thought I might break it. When he opened it, he immediately knew something was wrong. I could barely get the words out between gasps for air. I told him everything. The crashed snowplow, the empty cab, the voice. His parents called the police right away. Officers arrived not long afterward and asked me to show them exactly where the accident had happened. So we drove back. I pointed toward the same stretch of road, the same tree line, the same location. But when we got there was nothing. No snowplow, no broken tree, no debris, nothing at all. The officers searched the area anyway. After about 20 minutes, one of them walked back toward me with a confused look on his face. Then he said something I'll never forget. We didn't find any tire tracks. I stared at him. What do you mean? There are no plow tracks on this road, he said. In fact, there aren't any vehicle tracks here at all. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'd watched that truck crash with my own eyes. I'd stood beside it. I'd looked through the windows. I'd heard its engine running. But according to the police, there had never been a snowplow there in the first place. To this day, I still don't know what I saw that night. And honestly, I am not sure I ever want to find out. My name's Sebastian, and this happened when I was a sophomore in high school. I went to a private school in a neighboring city, which meant my weekdays were basically the same routine over and over again. Every morning, I'd catch the train to school. Every afternoon, I'd ride it back home. It wasn't exciting. It was just life. One winter evening, track practice ran later than usual. By the time our team boarded the train, the weather had completely changed. The first few snowflakes began falling just as the train pulled away from the station. At first, nobody thought much of it. But as the train continued down the tracks, the snowfall became heavier. Then heavier still. Within 20 minutes, it had turned into a full-blown blizzard. Looking out the windows, all I could see was white. The train finally reached my stop. Normally, one of my parents would pick me up, not that night. My phone buzzed just before I stepped off the train. It was my mom. "The roads are terrible," she said. "We can't get to you." I looked around the nearly empty station. "What do I do?" "You'll have to walk," she answered. "Just stay on the main route and call us if anything happens." It wasn't exactly the answer I wanted, but I didn't have much of a choice. Home was a little over a mile away. The problem was most of that walk cut through a long stretch of woods. I stepped onto the platform. The station was deserted. The train doors closed behind me, and within seconds, its lights disappeared into the storm. Then, silence. No conversations. No traffic. No footsteps except my own. I pulled my hood tighter and started walking. The snow was falling so hard it swallowed every sound around me. When I reached the highway crossing, I expected to wait for cars. Instead, there weren't any, not one. The roads looked abandoned. That alone felt unsettling. After crossing the highway, I reached the entrance to the wooded trail that led toward my neighborhood. The trees blocked what little light remained. Everything suddenly felt darker. The wind barely reached beneath the branches. It was eerily still. I kept walking. My boots sank deeper into the snow with every step. I honestly have no idea how long I'd been out there. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Then something made me glance up. The moment I did, my heart nearly stopped. Standing roughly 30 yards ahead was a man. He wasn't walking. He wasn't moving. He was simply standing in the middle of the trail, facing me. Even from that distance, something looked horribly wrong. He wasn't dressed for winter, not even close. While I had on a heavy coat, gloves, boots, and layers of clothing, he was wearing a short-sleeve t-shirt, basketball shorts, bare legs, no hat, no gloves, nothing. As impossible as his clothing was, his face was even worse. He was smiling, not a normal smile, not a friendly smile. It stretched unnaturally wide across his face. His eyes never blinked. He simply stared at me, smiling. Every instinct told me to turn around. But I couldn't move. For several long seconds, we just stood there. Neither of us said a word. The blizzard continued swirling between us. Then everything changed in an instant. Without any warning, his smile disappeared. His mouth opened, and he let out the most horrifying scream I've ever heard. Before I could react, he started charging directly at me. Full speed, I spun around and ran. I didn't care where I was going. Branches slapped my face. Snow flew beneath my boots. I could hear him crashing through the woods behind me. Every few seconds, I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was still coming, still screaming, still running. Adrenaline completely took over. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they were about to give out, but I refused to stop. Finally, I saw the trees begin to thin. The road appeared ahead. I burst out of the woods and onto the pavement. Only then did I dare look back. Nothing. The trail behind me was empty. The screaming had stopped. The man was gone. I didn't slow down until I reached my front door. My parents immediately knew something terrible had happened. I was shaking so badly I could barely explain what I'd seen. My dad tried convincing me that maybe it had been someone suffering from hypothermia. Maybe I'd misunderstood the situation. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Several hours passed. Eventually, I started calming down. I went upstairs to my bedroom and tried distracting myself with television. Outside, the snowstorm continued. Then I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A tree branch, I assumed. It tapped lightly against my bedroom window. I barely paid attention. Then it happened again, louder. I sighed, walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The second I looked outside, I screamed. He was there, the same man, standing inches from the glass, smiling again, his face pressed so close to the window that I could see every detail. His skin had turned a sickly purple from the freezing cold. His eyes were locked onto mine. He never blinked. He never moved. He just smiled. I stumbled backward and crashed onto the floor, screaming for my parents. My dad burst into the room. Just as he reached the window, he caught a brief glimpse of the man before he sprinted away into the darkness. Dad ran outside immediately, but by then, he was gone. The police searched our property for hours that night. They checked the woods, the backyard, the nearby roads. They never found him. Even stranger, they couldn't find any footprints leading away from my window. The snow around the house should have recorded every step. Instead, there was nothing. No tracks, no clues, no explanation. Sometimes I still wonder what would have happened if I'd frozen in fear back in those woods instead of running. And every winter, whenever snow starts falling outside my window, I can't help but remember that smile. The one waiting for me in the middle of the blizzard.